Well, welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. It's a new week, new location for one of us, Calum, in a different location. We like to keep up the mystery tour of locations for those of you watching over on YouTube. But it's been a hectic week at Aberdeen since, Calum, we last recorded. A week that has saw one Aberdeen podcast waken from its 2-month slumber. The ABZ podcast guys, who've been doing a brilliant job for their first season, despite what's been a terrible season on the pitch, release a mini episode on this crisis that we're away to delve into. Such a mini episode that's actually probably the same length as not our normal episodes, but keep up the good work, guys. And that's the mind games started, Gary, for ahead of the potential five-a-side game come summer. But Calum, what a week it's been off the field, let alone before we have to, unfortunately, get into events on the field.
I mean, yes, there's a lot happened. We're mourning a loss of a great man. I think we might go into a 2-month slumber, maybe with the bottom six. I mean, who could blame anyone about that? I'm in a new location. It's a bit dark and dingy, but it's the best we're doing right now. Dog sitting. So in my girlfriend's sister's room. And this is the best we can do. But dark and dingy sums up how I think we're feeling right now. But one thing, that is cheering me up slightly is, the increase in subscribers we've had recently, an influx of new subscribers, now just 25 away from 800 at time of recording on YouTube. So if you are new around here, please be sure to hit that subscribe button if you like what you see, notification bell on too, so you don't miss out in future. And maybe we can hit 800 subscribers before the end of the season. That would maybe cheer us up. But also follow us wherever you're tuning in and on Twitter at RTG_podcast. Glenn, how did I do that one?
Yeah, not too bad for not even having any script in front of you. Very well done. I can tell you do that professionally on YouTube with your football manager stuff, that's for sure. But no, Calum, it has been a pretty mental week off the pitch. We will, of course, look at that first of all before, as I said, unfortunately, taking a look at the fact that Aberdeen compounded their 2022 league fixtures with just 9 points from a possible 39, seeing us for the first time in 9 seasons end up in the bottom 6. Yes, it's going to be a tough episode indeed. But off the pitch, things started a couple of days after we recorded. Who's shocked? That Texo were announced as the club's new sponsor, replacing Saltire Energy. Texo signing a 3-year contract to be the club's official kit sponsor. They will also have their branding on all training and the youth academy kit as well. Of course, the women's team have a separate sponsor. And the prominent X found in the Texo logo, maybe this is going to kind of sum up our season, will feature on the rear of the shorts for next season, giving a prime target for Jim Goodwin to aim at if players aren't pulling their weight.
Well, that's a better joke than I was going to make relating to a cow's arse in a banjo, but there we go. Yeah, I mean, at least we've got someone tied up for that, hopefully a lucrative deal, because we need as much money as we can get now with recent events. But I can't say I know too much about Texo. Just good to get it sorted, I suppose, and fine to get it announced.
Yeah, and if Kieran Hope's listening, I'm just hoping that we don't let Texo fly any drones at Pittodrie, because I know Air Control wouldn't let those sort of accidents happen as Texo did last time they ventured to Pittodrie. But maybe more sponsors still to come, maybe some question marks. Obviously, well done to Rob Wixon getting the deal, but if the WhatsApp rumours doing the round last week was that we seem to fail and get a big corporation, we've resorted to the local companies, and that's what Texo falls under. But it's something tied up ahead of next season, and it certainly sounds like potentially the club are looking at a sleeve and back of the shirt sponsor, try and get money in that's been missed out from Europe and top 6. But Calum, your week didn't get any better, because just hours later, after the news that Texo were to become the club's new sponsor, on Tuesday night, when I forwarded you the WhatsApp rumour that it seemed that Andy Considine and the club had kind of gone separate ways on the contract negotiations, you said, "I'll believe it when I see it." Well, it was on Wednesday, the 6th of April, that the club tweeted an update on Andy Considine, confirming that the defender will be leaving the club at the end of the season. Quite an unfortunate end to the defender's career, not at Aberdeen, not the ending I think many of us expected, maybe not the timing that some also expected. And for me, a really unprofessional and embarrassing ending to Andy Considine's career at Aberdeen. Whether you want to think that's aimed at Andy Considine or the club, I'll let you have your own thoughts. But Calum, a really poor look all round, given the circumstances.
Certainly, I was grossly upset initially when it was announced, and just,
still wearing black to mark the occasion as well.
Grossly upset. I mean, he's been a player that has been around ever since I can remember at Aberdeen, and just the way it sort of happened, I think in terms of, wanting this 2-year deal when they're already offering a decent 1-year deal at the age of 35 off the back of an injury, as well as looking into the coaching side of things, is silly. Listening to his agent or whatever that may be, and whoever's leaked it, it just looks just a really, really bad look, and just not deserving of sort of the career he's had over the time. Pure people have had their criticisms. I've probably had my criticisms as well at times, perhaps. But just a man I've grown very fond of during his time at Aberdeen and my time supporting Aberdeen, and it's just sort of sad to see it ending the way it has. Maybe it's time. I mean, how many of the players otherwise, other than Andrew Considine, are currently going to be in the books at Aberdeen next season that are right now? Probably not much. So it's going to be an overhaul, and unfortunately, he's one to go as well. Yeah,
we're going to kind of come on to it when we look at the Ross County game, but maybe not exactly the news that the club would have wanted in terms of overshadowing the build-up to what would have been such an important game. And maybe that news and the way that it came out did have some effect on the players. Excuse me, certainly something that we can look into. But, whether it was Considine or his agent that leaked the news to the press, that look, it's the press's job when they get wind of a story to run with said story. I think the rumours were around that Scott Burns has been banned from Pittodrie. I've spoken to one of my friends that in the journalist circle, if you want to call it that, and he has not been banned from Pittodrie, which is good, because I think if that story was true, that's very Sevco type behaviour from the club. We don't really want to see us going down that route of banning journalists because they're not happy with a story. But that's literally what Scott Burns and any other journalist gets paid to do. If they hear a story and they know it's going to sell papers, get clicks on a link, they're going to run with it. The club, unfortunately, couldn't get ahead of it. Jim Goodwin wanted to have a pre-planned statement in his Thursday press conference with Andy Considine to announce that deal. Jim Goodwin using the term that the club were thrown under the bus. However, I think, there's certain things in terms of negotiations that should remain private. And I think the fact that the club decided to take the decision to release wage information that was being negotiated with Andy Considine is extremely poor, because the fact is now fans have seen what wages Andy Considine has been offered and think it's, hugely unacceptable that he didn't just take that offer that was on the table from the club. It is well within his rights to negotiate the deal. And I just think it just kind of muddies the whole deal. We've got a PR director, Zoe Ogilvie, she works for one of the biggest PR companies in Scotland. She's on the board of directors. I would have liked to thought she would have maybe had a wee look over that statement and thought, maybe there's some things we should retract from this. When it certainly comes to PR, the club hasn't exactly covered itself in glory this week with PRs. The rumours of leaks coming out from the club. Once again, the bottom 6 split fixtures were announced officially at 4:30. Well, I was made aware of what the fixtures were going to be at 4:00 because the ticket office very much knew that. So the club, I think, when the club want to blame players and agents, I think, they've still very much got to be looking in-house, because Andy Considine's left, but information is still getting out from inside the club. So blame the player and agent all you want, but you've got to look inside as well.
Well, it's not the first time. It's not Andy Considine's agent every single time something's
no.
How many times this season has saw that sort of happened so far? And also another thing is the way that Aberdeen immediately when they came back with that counter offer were just sort of like, oh no, well that's that then, as opposed to I'm sure they were looking to negotiate something a little bit further and that sort of maybe meet between the halfway mark between what they were both wanting. But regardless, and also a little bit tone deaf from them as well, revealing wages offered by a club, which is very, very what's the word? It's luxurious sort of wages, and given the way the world's going right now as well, it's a little bit tone deaf when they're releasing that kind of thing as well. But tone deaf and Aberdeen seem to be going hand in hand so far this season, and that's just another thing. And it was just left a little bit of bitter taste surrounding things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for anybody that's been living under a rock and hasn't, read that statement, the club offered Andy Considine a 1-year deal with a guaranteed six-figure sum in terms of wages, plus a pathway into coaching at the AFC Youth Academy and an opportunity to invest in future coaching badges. Considine, obviously well within his rights, countered that offer, asking for 50% more wages and an extra year. Jim Goodwin coming out and saying, look, he doesn't see Andy Considine getting many minutes next season. I think, we did kind of touch on that in the last episode, Calum, about whether or not we will see much of Considine, certainly between now and the end of the season, obviously, before we knew what was to come. But, I see a lot of people saying, oh, well, Considine's been offered 100 grand. I can't believe he's not taking it. Well, there was a further article that came out after the club's statement saying that Andy Considine had actually been offered a wage cut to stay at the club. So if you want, people are using the banding about the figure of £100,000. Let's say he's currently on £200,000. He may think that a wage cut of £100,000 is way too much. So if he's going back with 50% more, he's then asking for £150,000 as opposed to, his current contract. Again, we're just using figures out of thin air here. We're not saying we know what wage Andy Considine's on. So again, and even if he said, 25%, he's allowed to do that. But people are just jumped on the fact that the club have said we've offered him six figures and saying, how dare he, ask for more money? You're telling me if you didn't go for a job offer, you ask for a figure that your wage, what sort of wage do you have in mind? If you say 30,000 and a company comes back and says 25,000, you're not going to go, yeah, that's fine. You're going to say, okay, well, let's try and meet somewhere in the middle. But it seems that both the club and Considine are too far apart. And as I said, the defender is set to leave at the end of the season.
Very, very sad about it regardless. I think that's the main conclusion from this. You mentioned in terms of in mourning, it's just going to be very sad. Also, to be fair, might not get much football next season. Bloody well if we're in the Championship, I tell you that much. Still very possible, let's not forget.
Yeah, and we'll certainly have a lot more games at the start of the season, probably more than we would if we'd got into Europe through the Premier Sports group stages. But yeah, just a really kind of messy situation. And then with the club and Jim Goodwin saying that they weren't really keen to see information leaked to the press, on the, I think it was the evening of the 7th of April, the news was broken by the Evening Express. Kind of really comes as no shock that Michael Devlin's contract was to be terminated at the football club. A player who's really struggled with injury during his time at Aberdeen, probably spending more time in the Red TV gantry than on the pitch in recent times. But it took the club until the evening of the next day to officially release a statement, which I kind of found contradicted what Jim Goodwin was harping on about in his press conference, about that the club want to be ahead of these sort of information and put their own views out before anything's getting put out in the media.
I find it very baffling how this keeps happening, because you're guaranteed that wasn't Andrew Considine's agent do the leaking, was it? And it's just mental. How do they manage to have every other sort of like news outlet aware of this before they've actually just released the statement themselves? What are they doing, sitting twiddling their thumbs before they do release this information? It's baffling, but it's embarrassing, and it's probably won't even. It's not the first time this season, and it definitely won't be the last again. It's interesting. Once we've changed hands, all these sort of things start to happen. But I don't know. If that's got anything to do with it, I'm not sure. But it's interesting anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And then the next day as well, another departure announced with J. Emmanuel Thomas, who set himself a target of 20 goals this season, still 19 short of said target. I was going to say in that five-a-side speech that we were ready for war, but that was J. Emmanuel Thomas's motto for this season, and look how that panned out. So I thought, well, I better refrain from using that. But probably, Callum, just looking at the players specific there that we've spoken about, no real surprise for you. Both of them have found themselves having their contract terminated.
Devlin and J. Emmanuel Thomas, yes.
Yeah.
They could both probably get a game in our five-side game if they want to. Can't imagine the latter. Certainly will be doing too much. And not surprising at all. Weird timing for me, to be honest. I thought if they go in the summer, that sort of seems to make more sense. But the squad sort of being ripped apart mid-season when we still had a big game to play, it just doesn't seem right. And I'm all for sort of Jim Goodwin not having any slackers around the place or training the squad down to players that are willing to work or able to in terms of Mikey Devlin.
Mm.
But it just seems like really weird timing for me.
Yeah, well, I guess I said we're going to kind of come on to that when we looked at the game itself, but I suppose we'll just look at it now. Do you think that decision, or ending up all this information coming out in the press, because we haven't even looked at some of the other rumours that came, I think it was off a guy called Mainstan Moan on AFC Chat, and these rumours are beginning to be more substantiated than just a rumour. But do you think the decision to, especially around Considine, a player that's been at the club for so long, how much of an impact do you think that would have had on squad morale? And do you think that played any part in Saturday's disappointing defeat?
Probably a lot more did play into the defeat. But I'm sure it's probably bound to have some sort of an unsettling effect, whether it's it's lowering morale or whatever. It's just sort of shaking up the apple cart a little bit. And when they're trying to have all focus on that game, then you find out certainly someone like Andy Considine is going to be leaving. Someone who's been around the dressing room longer than anyone else in there has. It's bound to sort of have some sort of effect, and just sort of maybe take the focus off slightly and just unsettle things, upset the preparations. It's just not ideal at all. And the build up throughout the whole week to that game, things coming out sort of every day. It's bound to have some sort of effect.
Yeah, no kind of, I think Ross County did a motivational promo video a few days before the game, but we were, like you said, every day releasing news of players leaving the club rather than getting ourselves G'd up. And I think, it's kind of something I said on that preview, that there was almost kind of that feeling, whether it be from some fans or maybe some within the club, again, this is me just speculating, that the game was almost won before we even, took place. There was just a sense that we just needed to turn up and beat Ross County. But Ross County have been really resilient under Malky Mackay, who I'm sure, some maybe consider is possibly up there for manager of the season for the job he's done at Ross County. And, they fully deserved that win on Saturday. And I'm still going to delay putting off speaking about the game for even further, because, on the back, as I said, those WhatsApp rumours that were kind of doing the rounds last week obviously contained the fact that Andy Considine's contract wasn't to be renewed, and there would have been an official statement last week. Obviously, I think this was pre-leak via Scott Burns, but as part of those that line around Andy Considine, it was also suggested that both Dylan McGeoch and Funza Ojo, who did start the game on Saturday against Ross County, will both not be offered new contracts. Again, a lot of talk around the wages that both those players command. And I suppose when you look at some of the decisions Jim Goodwin's taken, changing of the guard with Andy Considine departing, Devlin, who's not played and possibly was on, a reduced wage given his rehab period, J. Emmanuel Thomas, an expensive signing, I'm sure, in terms of wages. Scott Brown as well, another off the wage book. Jim Goodwin's certainly not been afraid to, wield the axe. But as we said, in the build-up to one of our biggest games of the season, was this the right time to be making these decisions or having these sort of rumours becoming public?
I mean, could it not have waited another week, given we're not in the Scottish Cup semi-final this coming weekend? So that's a load of fun, especially when you've been getting it rubbed in your face since the weekend result from your heart-supporting mates, that even they did the business for us and we still managed to cock it all up. But I don't know. It's just not the greatest preparation at all in this sort of game, and it's not even the ones that have just been announced. There's further rumours, as you've just said. And could they not have waited until the gap between the final game before the split and before the split starts? Just keeps things a little bit more professional, keeps the focus. Go on, Glenn.
But then, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Say we started announcing that now, we're going to have to touch on it because it was made in the comments after our last episode on YouTube that, we were speaking about the impacts of top six and not speaking about a relegation scrap. We're probably going to have to discuss whether or not Aberdeen are in a relegation scrap. But if you went and got and announced that news on the back of being in the bottom six, how does that then start affecting players because let's be honest, I'm going to use the word now, it was a spineless performance from the players at the weekend. And are players that are maybe not going to be here next season willing to roll up their sleeves and fight for the club between now and the end of the season?
I think that's a fair point. I think the fans would probably have reacted better, given if we've missed out in the top six, then it's a lot of players that, look like they don't deserve to be here, get in the chop. I certainly see your point, though. It's just doing it throughout the season, not great, but when you've got a bit more of a gap and you do know your fate in terms of the top or bottom six, it is a bit more important because, now we could either be in a relegation scrap, but who knows if things were, I'm not saying it would have changed everything, but if things were a bit more positive and there was full focus on that kind of thing going into the game, maybe there could have been a better result. But having said that, who knows what would have taken to help us, because it was god awful.
It was indeed. And I did like the fact that you offered Jet and Devlin a place in our five-a-side team. And I think it would be quite fitting if Jet accepted that offer, because I know the ABZ boys had a bet on if Jet scored, they would be purchasing the J. Emmanuel Thomas T-shirts from the club website. So it would be quite fitting if he scored against them and then they were made to purchase it as a result of that. But
I think it's the only time he'd get 20 goals, to be honest.
Yeah, I would just sit back and let him do his magic. Jet and magic. I don't think that works.
Against us lunatics, yeah, probably.
Yeah, well. On back to the rumour mill that was doing the rounds, it was stated that Aberdeen have shown interest in Cove Rangers left-back Harry Milne, the 25-year-old who grabbed both Cove's goals at the weekend in their 2-0 win over Falkirk, has scored 5 goals this season and 6 assists as well as 4 yellows and 1 red card. An interesting rumour, I suppose, given as you pointed out, we've already got Jack McKenzie, Johnny Hayes and Kieran Ngwenya fighting for that left back slot. Do we need more competition at left back?
It is a tough one. I think if we do need more competition at left back, I'm not sure Harry Milne's the answer. I'm sure anyone who's watched Cove this season will tell me he's been very good this season for them. At the same time, that's against League One opposition every single week. Arguably, we could be playing Championship opposition every week. So I suppose there's that to consider. But just when you consider, Hayes, not the answer long term. Harry Milne is 25, but at the same time, then you've got McKenzie coming through. And I'm probably more excited about Kieran Ngwenya at this stage. than Jack McKenzie, who I think is even younger than the former there. I just don't know. It doesn't excite me. Does it excite you? It just doesn't seem like the type of move that would, to be fair, matters massively.
Yeah, to be fair, there's not a lot around Aberdeen Football Club that's exciting me just now. But it's certainly not a signing that would shift season tickets, with the greatest of respect to Harry Milne. When I watched Cove in the Highland League at times, he was a player that was coming through at a young age and did look at a good talent. But I suppose, there'll be people listening or watching this episode, Calum, being like, well, look what Dundee United did when they picked up young talents from League 1, 2 and went on and developed them and sold them for, millions of pounds. So I wouldn't...
Time 25 is not young though, is it?
True, I'll give you that. But they're obviously maybe coming into his prime sort of age. You could maybe get the best out of him for a couple of seasons and then shift them on. Like you, I remain unconvinced by Jack McKenzie. Even more so just around the song that's sung. So if he's on the sidelines and I don't have to hear that bloody song anymore, I'll
Jack McKenzie,
honestly, so tragic. But I did, as I said to you, I wonder if we did go and sign a left back, if there's maybe thoughts on moving the likes of Jack McKenzie, because he's maybe got the build for a left-sided centre-back rather than an out-and-out left wing-back, left-back role. Jim Goodwin does want to sort the defence, but...
I think I'd be even more unsettled if he was shifted in a centre-back. Oh.
Well, yeah. I mean, it remains to be seen, obviously, what kind of happens around there. And obviously, to continue on, it seems like Dean Campbell, Gary Woods, Conor McLennan and Joe Lewis were told that they were free to find new clubs. I don't know if I agree on all of them or believe all of that, given that would mean we would just be left with Tom Ritchie on our goalkeeping books, and then two other from the under-18s. Obviously, Jamie Shingler was on the bench for that Motherwell Cup game, which we went out of. Conor McLennan, I think everyone listening knows our opinion on Conor. Not exactly hit the heights in a must-win game as well on Saturday. And then I think Dean Campbell's also struggled for game time when he's been on loan at Kilmarnock as well. On top of that, a £200,000 bid has apparently been launched for Charles Dunn. I thought £100,000 was bad, but fuck me, 200,000 is even worse.
It seems yeah.
I was listening to a State of Scottish Football in midweek when Motherwell fan Jenna Thompson was discussing this kind of rumour, and her concerns around Charles Dunn as a Motherwell fan was how injury prone Charles Dunn was. So ticks a lot of boxes for Aberdeen's recruitment, I suppose. But I suppose when on the pitch, she did say, he was a reliable player, but her concern would be about how fit Charles Dunn could stay. So yeah, probably we'll expect to see that scarf above his head very shortly. Like and then finally, Christian Ramirez apparently launching a request to return to USA. I believe his family, Valbar and the kids, return to America this week. So I'll be interested to see, a lot of people have said Christian's down tools since Stephen Glass has left. Well, if that's the case, I hate to think what he'll be like when his family head back for that last 5 games.
I mean, it did look like that when we played against Ross County, certainly anyway, didn't it? Player we'd probably miss, we'd have missed this season given his lack of goals, but I suppose going into summer, we've got plenty of opportunity to try and replace if he does go. It'll be interesting. I suppose, he got another year on his contract after this summer, some sort of fee, maybe we can, recoup what we paid for him, or who knows? It'll be interesting. But I think in terms of all the players you've just covered there and who we're going to bring in this summer, we're going to have to see a big overhaul, I think, regardless of what happens. Also, we've not even talked about the possibility of, if Ramsey and Ferguson then leave too. It's going to be a very, very, very busy summer in a sense. I think it's needed, but at the same time, then when so many new players come in at once, there's also that trouble of getting them all to gel quickly.
And I suppose, Callum, though, we went through I was doing the preview for the Livingston game with the Talk Livy boys before recording this episode, and they brought up the comment that the fact that Aberdeen went through a rebuild in the summer under a new manager in Stephen Glass. Well, it kind of shows that experiment, that trusting that process hasn't exactly paid off. Dave Cormack. Yes. But Dave Cormack, whether you want to blame him, whether you want to blame Stephen Gunn, because obviously he'll have been involved in some of these transfer dealings. Let's not remember as well that some of these departures that have been announced, I think it was Frian Wakali, I saw a tweet in midweek that 9 of our summer signings have either had their loans cut short or are now no longer with the club. And we're only in April. I mean,
it's superb, really, isn't it? It's really, really good business.
It is just a waste of money. Not only that, you're probably still paying off Darren McInnes's contract as well. Yeah. And then obviously Stephen Glass, I know he was on a rolling contract as well, so I'm not sure how that will have worked with, obviously not seeing that out. But it's another overhaul coming up this summer, and we find ourselves, as I said, for the first time in 9 seasons in the bottom 6. Are we going to have to accept that this is where we are for a couple of seasons until we can get the right recruitment in and get the right players? Because as you alluded to there, Callum, we haven't even counted for the likes of bids coming in for Lewis Ferguson and Calvin Ramsey.
We could be here for a while, which is quite concerning considering how rapid the decline has sort of been for us. But I suppose at the same time, you could say this kind of thing has been coming for the past few seasons. We sort of been treading water, holding on to sort of that 4th place position. Previously having been sort of challenging 3rd, 2nd too. It's going to be a massive summer, and Jim Goodwin has to get it absolutely right. If he doesn't, oh God, I don't know how quickly things will then turn on him. Fingers crossed he does get it right. He seems to be saying some of the right things as well in terms of his recruitment process too. Players that are willing to work, but at the same time, we need that quality as well to make sure. I suppose when the willingness to work and things like that, the work ethic is half the battle, especially in this league. But to get up there with Hearts, Dundee United at this stage, potentially Motherwell, with when they get the European money as well.
Of Ross County even.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be really bad in summer if they qualify for Europe and they're a more attractive team to sign for than Aberdeen.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be an interesting summer. We've also got the VAR vote that is taking place on Tuesday, the 12th of April. We're recording this on the Monday evening, so we won't know the official outcome. Well, we may or may not by the time this episode is released on Wednesday. But I suppose one thing we've got to be thankful for being in the bottom 6 is we actually don't have to pay as much money for the implementation of VAR.
Genius, just absolute genius there from Dave, isn't it?
Honestly, it's some brilliant budgeting work here by Jim Goodwin and Dave Cormack. Of course, in jest, because as you alluded to, Callum, if we don't get things right in the summer, pressure may build on Jim Goodwin, or Jim Gooddraw, as some people are keen to call him, given his record of drawed games so far at his time in Aberdeen. But pressure has maybe already begun to build around Jim Goodwin as Aberdeen failed to make the top 6. One win since Ryan Hedges left the club. Aberdeen going down 1-0 to Ross County at the weekend. I don't think both of us have even bothered to watch the highlights back because it's that painful, and I didn't want to get even angrier than needed before recording. But Callum, what was your initial reaction? Well, I know both of us left as soon as Joseph Hungbo scored the penalty, which sparked wild scenes in what was a very respectable away end for Ross County, it has to be said. I
did say before the game, I was quite enjoying the travelling Ross County fans. Decent following. A lot of them very young and boisterous as well. I think that more can be said for that than the Pittodrie crowd. I think as soon as Hibs went 1-0 up, it was, oh God. And then the football in our park was terrible as well. And it just really failed to get sort of the crowd going. But I know I've not bothered to watch the highlights back. I mean, what highlights, more to the point, and it must have been about a minute long. Basically, the penalty. It was like, if you've ever been out during the day or if you've gone out in town and you see the smart middle-aged people who go out during the day and then they're absolutely rinsed by sort of 8 o'clock, right? And then they go home early. But you've seen two middle-aged, sort of old men who've had a bit too much to drink and they've had an argument, right? And they've started fighting. They're having the worst fight ever. Nobody hits anyone, and then someone falls over and knocks himself out. That was basically what happened. And in that case, Aberdeen were the ones who didn't get near Ross County. Ross County didn't get near them, and then eventually Aberdeen knocked themselves out. And that was that. That's essentially what happened in that game. The best way I can think to describe it. If you've not seen anything from it, don't bother. It was horrendous. We didn't deserve to win. Basically, that's all I can say.
And that last comment, Calum, despite a brilliant analogy on the game itself, how galling is it that in a must-win game at home against Ross County, with the greatest of respect to Ross County, who, as I said, fully, deserve their place in the top 6. They've worked hard and, ground out results this season. But I don't think I can disagree with you on that, Calum. We didn't deserve to win a must-win home game, and we didn't do anything to deserve winning that game.
Not at all. I mean, chances for both sides very limited. I think Ross County hit the target once, and that was the penalty. In terms of us, we can't have done much more. It was just very, very poor at times. So unbelievably laboured, the passing, so slow, underhit passes, taking forever to get their players standing, waiting for the ball. If it even gets them, and it's not just played straight off the park. Neil said you'd think they were playing at Heathrow with the way they were playing. It was just an appalling game of football. One of the worst games of football I've seen in so long. And Ross County ended up nicking it. I mean, we'll come on to their penalty. There's plenty of thoughts on that, I'm sure. But, it was just atrocious. And to be honest, I was glad to leave early. It was just painful.
Yeah, it was. And, as I said to Stu as the penalty was taken, I says, if this goes in, I'm leaving, because we're not scoring one, let alone two. We haven't shown any intent. Well, he said 2 shots on target. I think it was a David Bates header in the first half. I don't even know what the other attempt on target was.
I remember their goalkeeper making a very good save down low to his left.
I don't even think it was a very good save. It's probably a save you expect.
Probably, but that's basically the only chance I remember. Save, the only thing he had to do. I can't even remember who took the attempt on. There was just so little to remember about the game. It was just the most forgettable match in history. And the only reason we remember so much about it is because of how bad it was. It was honestly atrocious.
I'm just glad I actually took the decision to leave the car at home, get the bus in, and have plenty of alcohol.
I was sober. I mean, that made it even worse.
Yeah, well, Broon didn't even manage to make the game. He was too hungover, so I think he definitely made the best decision out of that. But certainly a decision, you said the penalty is going to prove to have a lot of talking points. One decision that also generated a lot of talking points was the appearance of Jim Goodwin at the pre-match fan zone, which took place. It was a sellout fan zone event at the Beach Ballroom. I've heard mixed reviews of the event. I don't think you were there, were you, Calum?
I was not. No, I was nursing a hangover also myself.
Okay, well, at least you managed to make the game. But at a pre-match fan zone for Aberdeen, you would have fully expected Aberdeen songs to be played. There was not, which I find slightly strange. But Jim Goodwin, now, whether this was a decision from Dave Cormack to get the manager along to galvanise the support pre-match, but Jim Goodwin appeared at the pre-match fan zone. As soon as I saw the club tweet the video, now I made these comments to those I was with in Pittodrie Bar. First thing I said was, I'm glad he's taking today's game seriously. And as Craig Hunter said to me on Twitter at full time when I quoted a tweet saying I didn't agree with it, whether or not you want to say that has an effect on the game or not, says if we'd won the game, no one would have been speaking about it. And I totally agree with that point that Craig makes. But we didn't win the game. We put in a dreadful performance. Admittedly, that's not on Jim Goodwin. You've got to look at the players for that. But when results haven't been great, Callum, we then fail to win our most important game of the season and ever look like winning the game. Fans are going to question the appearance of your manager at a fan event
2 hours
90 minutes before the game.
Yeah. I can.
What's your take on it?
In terms of, for people there, it's probably at the time. It's great. You get to see your manager. He's taking the time out to come and sort of thank you for your support or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But just in the way the game played out, you're right. It just doesn't look great looking back on it because the players sort of played without a whimper. They didn't look up for it, and that's on the manager to get that out of the players. Admittedly, once they cross that white line, it's on them. But it was just a pathetic performance, and I don't know. It probably, let's be honest, it probably makes absolutely no difference on the outcome of the game. But it's just the way it looks, and it's probably nitpicking, and that's just the way things are. So many things have gone wrong for this season. That's basically what's happening right now.
Yeah, and if people think I was having a direct go at Jim Goodwin himself,
he absolutely was. He texted me and messaged me that he was having a go.
I'm not having a go at Jim Goodwin. We're not here sitting looking for a reason to jump on the bandwagon or create a bandwagon to get the manager out. Don't. Somebody from my work texts me. Somebody from my work texts me at full time saying, "I told you to be careful what you wish for." I still haven't even opened the message, let alone had the courage to reply to it.
And having fun.
Well, given it was the HR manager from our work, I think it's wise that I didn't reply.
Yeah, no, certainly. Yeah, certainly not on Saturday. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. Please don't have that opinion again.
I'm just having fun because it's been a really sad podcast so far.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's not exactly going to get cheerier, but no, it's not exactly. It wasn't a good look, and when the result doesn't go your way, the club have opened itself to people will call it a cheap shot, but that's what it is. Fans will be able to take that opportunity. And I called it before the game. I didn't think it was a good look when the game is so important. I'd rather we've spoke there about the build up. There was loads of distractions. Whether or not Jim Goodwin even wanted to be there, he was probably told to be there by Dave Cormack. That the fan zone looked very Americanized. For those of you that have been to Shettleston before semi-finals and finals at Hampden, kind of has a similar setup, I suppose, where it's got tables, it's serving food, drink, but they don't chuck the tables on the dance floor. They leave dance floor area for folk to congregate, sing Aberdeen songs, create an atmosphere. I don't know, it didn't really look like the kind of fan zone that I thought it would. But there have been people that did think it was good. I think, certainly for getting kids involved, I've seen a lot of kids walking about with face paintings on. Obviously, Aberdeen Heritage had their site as well. So there will have been people that enjoyed the experience, and it will have been tailored at families, and that's fine. But maybe some things to work on for future fan events, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when it comes to home games, you do have sort of lots of other options for the people that want to go and sing pre-match, basically any pub around the ground. And I think the labelling of a fan zone was maybe their mistake, where there's sort of that misunderstanding of what it was going to be. But I do agree in terms of that, for families and things, it probably was excellent, and get kids involved. But I just think maybe that's how they sort of maybe mislabeled it and shouldn't have gone with the use of the term fan zone, because when you hear the word fan zone, you think of that sort of pre-match, everyone's getting up for
boisterous,
yeah, exactly. But regardless, it's still sort of worked out in a way for them, I suppose. But, it was their first attempt, and they're probably going to improve on it if it does carry on going forward.
Yeah, and I think the club admitted that they weren't going to get it perfect first time, so room for improvement, and we'll see if it does improve in future. On the game itself, though, Callum, Funzo Ojo and Marley Watkins started the game in place of Calvin Ramsey, who dropped to the bench. No word of him being injured, and didn't, make an appearance during the game, which I thought was kind of strange, because if he's fit enough for the bench, he would have been fit enough to maybe feature. And then I think no real surprise that we saw Marley Watkins returning to the starting lineup.
No, not really any real surprise. In terms of the Ramsey one, it's certainly weird that he didn't, if he's on the bench, he didn't even come on with it. I don't know if he came on after we went 1-0 down, so I was not in the stadium, but no, he didn't come on. He didn't come on when we were sort of chasing that goal with half an hour, 20 minutes to go, which you think if he's even on the bench for, then he could surely manage that sort of length of time. Otherwise, don't bother having him there. That was sort of a weird one for me. But in terms of Marley Watkins coming in and starting, certainly no surprise. I thought he did very well. I've seen a few people disagree with that opinion, but for me, I think that's fair enough. I think for a lot of the time, in terms of someone getting the ball and running at them, okay, he didn't create sort of any, maybe too many clear-cut chances, but in terms of getting on at them and actually having a run at them, most of the time, in my opinion, it came through that man or the little muscle boy on the right-hand side, who, again, did not have a great game, but when this is all we've got to go for in terms of positives, I mean, that's what I'm doing.
I'm glad you acknowledged that he didn't have a great game, because I actually thought both our wingers were pretty poor. Maybe Marley Watkins was the better. It's just a strange one. We've seen in glimpses of Vicente Bizaouin what he can do. Maybe defensively, as Jim van der Velde said, doesn't maybe necessarily track back all the time, so kind of leave ourselves a bit exposed defensively. But I thought Ross County did a good job in dealing with both our wingers at the weekend. Something I was kind of having a thought of today was how blunt and ineffective our attack has been since the departure of Ryan Hedges. A player people said was largely ineffective, which, I think we kind of touched on before this season, could be hit or miss. We've only won one game since Ryan Hedges left the club. That was that game against Hibernian in the league. I don't know. Is that something you feel, that our attack is worse off since Ryan Hedges left?
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty damning. I think not only the fact that Ryan Hedges left, the fact that we only then brought in Bizaouin when it was clear to see at least another one or two forward options were required, but that's something, we've said many times, we're probably sounding like a broken record, but at the same time, it's played into the fact that we're in the position we are in now, the total lack of options. It's certainly a horrendous statistic that since Hedges has left, we've only won one game in the league against Hibs. I certainly think we could have done with him towards the back end of the season. And whilst maybe not consistent, he probably would have chipped in with, a winning goal or two or something that made something happen in one of those close games. And it's just frustrating. I mean, I know you've been critical of Vicente Bizaouin. I suppose we do need to remember that the fact he has just turned 21. He's still very raw. I think that's probably the best words to describe it. At times he can be exciting and sort of direct and make things happen, but he's got to fine tune things, but hopefully he will have the time to do that, and we do see the player that he could potentially become.
Yeah, I know people do think I'm maybe being harsh on him, but when you had Ryan Hedges that could produce a bit of quality from nowhere, I think it's been quite evident we've been missing that. And I think also on the back of that, as you said, only replacing him with Vicente Bizaouin, just where we are now, bottom six, is probably highlight how poor, once again, we discussed it at length, was how poor that January transfer window was. We left ourselves vulnerable and have ultimately paid the price.
Yes.
So again, as much as people maybe want to blame a manager, whether it be Goodwin, Stephen Glass, you've got to look above them at Stephen Gunn and Dave Cormack, because for all the talk of backing the manager, which Dave Cormack came out and said under Stephen Glass, we didn't see that backing in January. Now, whether that backing in January didn't come because Dave Cormack didn't have faith in Stephen Glass, well, if he didn't have faith in Stephen Glass come January, he should have made the decision to get rid of him sooner and made that appointment in early January to give Jim Goodwin that time to get players in to hopefully help improve the situation that we had found ourselves in. But hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Certainly, and just talking about all that has made me think of the striking similarities between us and Hibs as well. But I think they're suffering from the exact same thing, and they also ended up missing out on the top six on the last day before the split. It's something that we've got to get absolutely right in summer. We are dealing with inexperienced sort of head of football operations or whatever they're wanting to call it, but it's just been very, very frustrating, and we've gone on about it all through the season. Essentially, we're going on about it today. I feel like it's been a very dull and dour episode today, and it's not going to get any better between now and the end.
And certainly one of our longest episodes for a while. That's for sure. So if you're still sticking with us through the doom and gloom, thanks very much for doing so. But Callum, one thing that I spoke about in the preview episode was how good Ross County have been at getting results when they've not really had to keep the ball or have much possession. And we saw that again on Saturday.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at the data, Dave. Evening. We had 62% possession versus Ross County's 38%. Once again, Aberdeen dominating the shots stats, 15, 2 on target, story of our season, creating plenty. Well, I say creating, but doing fuck all with it.
Exactly.
And the opposition barely testing our goal, just the 4 shots for Ross County. But ultimately, and again, similar story of our season, 1 shot on target, and we end up losing the game.
It's almost exactly what we talked about before, that we need to be wary of. Ross County will be very comfortable, although they'll come up and sit behind us and hit us on the break, and they did exactly that. And it only got worse when they took Joseph Hungbo on off the bench. Or is it Joseph? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Hungbo. Anyway.
And they only did that with 8 minutes to go as well.
Exactly. And it only got worse, and ultimately paid the price. I mean, the fact we've had 2 shots on target out of 15 total attempts across 90 minutes is absolutely woeful. I mean, the one that really sticks out of my head is McCrory ballooning it over the bar from about 12 yards out. Absolutely ridiculous. The fact he didn't hit the target, work the keeper, force a block off the line or something like that. It's just the same story over and over again, where it's toothless, it's gutless, spineless, another word you've used already. It was just an absolutely awful game of football, and we've seen it so many times this season. It's horrendous. Yeah,
an absolute shit show from back to front from Aberdeen. And as you said, we've seen it far too many times. And the sad state of affairs was that McCrory chance was probably our best chance of the 90 minutes.
Yep.
And it came in the first half. It was an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, another one is sort of the one we didn't even end up with a shot on goal at or off target, where the ball sort of came through and Ramirez went to sort of reach and get to it, and he didn't get there on time in the second half. As well. And it's just 2 massive chances that we don't even end up hitting the target, working the keeper, whatever. But that, and just when we kept missing those chances or those opportunities or whatever, you just sort of knew it was never ever going to come. You felt the goal was never going to come. And I kept looking at the clock, like, okay, half an hour to go, perfect, that's fine, still enough time to win this game. And it didn't even seem like they upped the tempo and the intensity at all to go and really try and force it. And if then that sort of happens and then we get massively caught out at the back or whatever, and we lose a goal, having thrown the kitchen sink, having created loads of chances, I'm not as mad. But we were just so pathetic going forward. And they go and, get their goal eventually, and that's it, walk out, that's it, done. No point carrying on.
Yeah, I had to laugh at the BBC match report where it said Aberdeen upped their intensity in the second half as news filtered through that Hearts had taken the lead. And you did hear that in the ground, that, there was the kind of cheer, certainly in the Red Shed, when it, became evident that Hearts had taken the lead. But I didn't see a change in the intensity in our play.
Not at all. And they must have been aware, okay, I mean, they're guaranteed there was at least some people on the sidelines that were aware of what was going on, because there always seems to be the case. And when you see the fans celebrating, what do you think they're celebrating for? Because you've given them fuck all to celebrate, have you? The useless 11 horses on the park. It was just, and they didn't up the intensity to go for it at all. It was just not what you expected at all. And it was just a horrendous game of football. Okay, the conditions maybe played a part. At the same time, that affects both teams. Deal with it, keep the ball on the deck. But the time's just so slow laboured in the build-up play, and then passes not getting there, going way off the mark and out for a throw-in. We didn't deserve to win the game. We don't deserve to finish in the top 6. It's as simple as that, really, isn't it?
And the more that game went on, as you said, I was kind of similar view as you, right? There's half an hour. We were surely going to look like doing something, although we'll come to it 5 minutes later. I thought, well, we're definitely not doing something now. Was the fact that the longer the game went on, the fact I was like, if we win this game, this is going to be the most undeserved top 6 finish I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Because we didn't look like doing anything. That first 45 minutes was the most tragic 45 minutes of football I've seen all season. And to be honest, we've seen some amount of tragic performances from Aberdeen over the course of the season so far. But, you said Laidlaw had a decent save to make down low. I'm not going to lie, I don't remember it. I'll put that down to the copious amount of tenants I had. But I think the telling thing is that Laidlaw didn't have a serious save to make during that 90 minutes.
Nope. And how many times we've sort of seen that happen, and then you hand the other team one chance and they go and take it. You only need one chance in those tight games, and Ross County were clinical, albeit 100%. I know it's from the penalty spot, but still got to put it away under that pressure. 100%. And also, when a game's going on like that, the changes the manager makes. Oh my God. Why?
I'm glad you did the introduction for that.
Why? I know, we've sort of been asked around it. I'm not blaming this season on Jim Goodwin, but chasing a game, and you take off Ross McCrory, who, maybe hasn't been excellent, but at times has sort of been driving from the midfield. I would say maybe one of the better players on the park on the day. You take him off, you leave Funso at right back, who has done absolutely nothing. When there's been grass in front of him, he's been so hesitant to go and push forward into it. When you could have maybe moved McCrory to right back, kept him on the park, taken off Funso, put on Jack McKenzie at left back, solid enough defensively, going forward.
Put on a show, though.
Of course he was. He was, yes. It was not worth watching, that show. And the Marley Watkins one, okay, going into the game, he only ever had an hour in him, whatever. In a game like that, you've got to win. He's been, for me, one of the better players going forward. And you take him off after an hour when we've not got a game for another 2 weeks. Surely he can last another 10, 20 minutes, whatever, whilst you go for the game. Give him a few days off if he needs it, whatever, to recover. Goodness me. And then Conor McLennan is the most baffling football I've seen in my life. I kind of like him, not necessarily as a football player. He can take the ball down perfectly. The ball's spinning 30 yards up in the air. He can take it down with a glorious touch. And then he can't go and beat a man on the dribble or whatever. It's the most baffling thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand. 1 second he looks fantastic. The next, he looks like he's never played football in his life. What's going on?
It feels, Callum, like a whole season's worth of optimism has finally caught up with you, and there's so much seed built up. This is just incredible. But I totally the substitutions. I could have walked out at that point.
Uh-huh.
They were just baffling. I'm totally with you that McCrory for McKenzie one didn't make any sense. Funso Ojo, you made your point on him. Again, I didn't really notice much that he was doing at the weekend. But again, Calvin Ramsey's...
Sorry, whoa. Apart from that ludicrous overhead kick in his own box, which I did enjoy. Sorry, I'll give him credit for that. But risky playing on
Don't
the
remember.
left, so you don't
but again, if Calvin Ramsey's fit enough to be on the bench, the substitutions occurred in the 66th minute. Surely, like you said, with Marley Watkins, we've got 2 weeks off. Surely we could have got 25 minutes out of Calvin Ramsey. He's been better going forward than he has defensively. He'll probably have been buoyed by his goal against Dundee. He's caused teams problems. Could we have not done that as a gamble? I just didn't. This is nothing on Jack McKenzie because he's not that type of player. But when you're going searching for a goal, Jack McKenzie's not the player you want to be seen coming off the bench. And then, as you say, Conor McLennan, he had some brilliant touches in the game, but then his second touch knocks the ball 15 yards in front of him and the county defence clean it up. It's just, as you said, he's just such a baffling player.
Exactly. And then also, Michael Ruth, okay, he's very young, he's raw. He's a striker. He's probably got a point to prove. If you need a goal, throw him on. And then Dante Polvara, he's 6'6". When you've seen the game's not going for you for 80 minutes, what you've been trying to do, hoy him on, put him up in support of Christian Ramirez, whatever. Who cares? Lump the ball up to him. He's 6'6", for God's sake. Things weren't working. It's not the most ugly way of doing things. But Ross County's defence barely had a challenge at all throughout the whole game. The only time they looked slightly threatened was when Lewis Ferguson played one of his 900 diagonals onto the top of their left back when Marley Watkins was on that side. And then we ended up swapping him for Basawin. It made no sense at all. It was absolutely baffling. And you're right. I think all the frustration is coming out. I'm not looking forward to the bottom six, Glenn. I'm really not.
No, we haven't even looked at the fixtures, which we maybe will do a bit more in depth on the Livingston preview, because there's obviously been so much to. Yeah, I think you do, but baffling substitutions, and things didn't get better. They didn't. I don't know what impact Jim Goodwin was hoping that they were going to have off the bench, but they didn't have any impact. And ultimately, Ross County, as it's strange. We both kind of spoke about it in that preview. The fact that we almost could work out what Ross County's game plan would be, and Aberdeen couldn't react to that. The fact that we knew Ross County would be quite happy to sit in, quite happy to hit Aberdeen on the counter attack. They did that, and then they waited until the last 10 minutes to start really kind of causing us problems. And the first penalty shout that they had was when Regan Charles-Cook burst into the box and went down under the challenge of Jack McKenzie. And I have to admit, I'm stunned that Greg Aitken did not point to the spot, because for me, I don't know about you, obviously you're in the South Stand in Section S, so we've got a different view from that. But for me, I was right in line with it on that side of the 6-yard box. I thought it was a stonewall penalty. I don't know about you, Calum.
Admittedly, not watched it back, but at the time I thought, oh, fucking hell, we've got away with one there. So basically...
Yeah, I'm the same as you, both not watched it back, but in real time, I thought, well, there's another bit of luck that's going in our favour, not that we're wanting to even think about taking it.
And I have been informed by family members that have watched the highlights that we were lucky to not have given away a penalty 5 minutes before we did. So there we are.
Well, but Ross County did eventually get their penalty as Joseph Hungbo blasted the ball off Johnny Hayes' arm. When I did see the goal back briefly on Sky Sport News on Sunday morning, part of me wondered if the Johnny Hayes' arm was actually outside of the box. Again, albeit I couldn't bring myself to rewind it and watch it back. But to be honest, when I saw the incident happen, I all I remember is seeing Johnny Hayes' arm just fling back. And as soon as Greg Aitken pointed to the Scot, I couldn't really complain about it, because I thought, well, it has quite clearly hit his hand. But to be honest, I was probably just that glad that I had an excuse to leave the game.
Maybe. My opinion was yes, whilst it's hit his arm, his hand, whatever. What are you meant to do from that distance? how are you meant to react to get it out of that? It's not in a natural position. It is relatively by his side. What is he meant to do to get out of the way of the ball? I mean, ultimately, in terms of the fact they just had a penalty, Stonewall penalty not given, maybe it does even out there. Maybe that's playing on Greg Aitken's mind at the same time as well, which it should have.
Exactly, and that was one thing I was going to ask you. Do you think Greg Aitken realised he made a mistake around the Regan Charles Cook incident and thought, shit, I need to correct this, and that was his first opportunity? Because, as you said, like, whether or not, when I saw that incident back, it does, what do you expect Johnny Hayes to do? And it would be interesting to know whether or not VAR, when it comes in, or if it comes in next season, would that overturn that sort of decision? Probably not, I would imagine.
But at the same time, I think it wouldn't be given if he hadn't given it and then they looked at it, because that's weird and that's the way they do it. It's bizarre.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons why I hope it just doesn't come into Scottish football. But yeah, as you rightly said, if he is regretting the decision not to award Ross County a penalty for that foul not foul on Regan Charles Cook, that shouldn't have an impact on such a soft, harsh, whatever you want to call that penalty decision that they eventually get. But you've still got to be able to put it away. Joe Lewis has still got the opportunity to save it. And, fair play to Joseph Hungbo, who's been brilliant from the spot for Ross County this season, and makes no mistake, just down the middle, jobs are good in 1-0. And yeah, there was a mass exodus from Pittodrie, ourselves included.
Yeah, I mean, you were probably better off staying to beat the traffic, to be honest. It was, I thought, maybe the fact he had so long before he took the penalty, I was thinking, sometimes when players have a long time to think about it, they are in two minds and they end up messing up. No, as cool as you like, the coolest man at Pittodrie slots it away and ultimately gives Ross County probably the top six finish that they deserve. I don't think we can have too much arguments about that, in all honesty, regardless of what we say about the penalty.
Yeah. So consigning Aberdeen to the bottom six, consigning Aberdeen to the group stages in the Premier Sports Cup, and a maximum potential of 1.43 million in prize money, assuming we manage to lift ourselves to the dizzy heights of 7th in the league. As I said, Callum, unfortunately, we do need to now discuss this based on the comments that was in our YouTube video from the last episode. Are we in a relegation scrap?
I think so. On the basis of things, with our form, if it carries on the way it is, then we could find ourselves struggling. And obviously, I don't expect we'll get relegated, but we could end up in that playoff quite easily. I mean, Johnston had just been absolutely smashed by Celtic, but prior to that, they were on a decent run of form. And most importantly, they've got a striker that's sort of scoring goals in Callum Hendry, funnily enough, as well. I think in terms of the split fixtures, and we'll come on to speak about that more in the next episode, but maybe we've been handed sort of two favourable games where if you win those two, then you've got a decent chance. But it's Aberdeen. It's the 2021-22 season. Nothing is a given right now. So I am a little bit concerned. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, we will come on to them more in the next episode, but for once we actually had a bit of information come out before recording. Oh. So I suppose we should include what the split fixtures are for Aberdeen. We start at home to Livingston, and as you said, 2 home fixtures, the second fixture being Dundee at home, before 2 away trips to Hibernian and then St Johnstone in midweek, before ending with St Mirren at home on a Sunday lunchtime. What a horrible way to end the season. But given our away form, it's probably favourable that we are starting off with 2 home fixtures, Callum. But on the back of what was, an insipid, spineless, uninspiring, choose whatever adjective you want to describe the performance on Saturday, against a Livingston side that they were denied a top 6 place by a 93rd minute goal at home to Motherwell, right now, we're recording this 2 days after the game. I kind of have no real confidence in the squad that we're going to go and get 3 points from that game. And with St Johnstone playing Dundee on that opening split weekend, there is the opportunity that we could find ourselves, again, getting dragged down towards that 10th place.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good point you raised about Livingston. In terms of Dundee, I think there is potential, if things all go our way, for us to relegate Dundee on that day, which would be interesting against Martin McGee. However, I will not be there, which is unfortunate. I will be in Budapest. So, I mean, to be fair, at least I'm not missing out on some lovely cinch top 6 fixtures, so that's okay. But looking at those bottom 6 fixtures, it's just depressing. There is concern there, and certainly if we go out and fumble the first game, then all of a sudden you just know there's going to be panic stations, don't you?
Yeah, and I won't even be at that first game because I'll be on a stag do in Portugal. So
lucky you.
Maybe if we do, as you say, fumble that first game, it'll probably be a good thing that I'm on a stag do. Can quickly drown those sorrows. But after the game, Jim Goodwin coming out and saying that the players gave it their all, Calum. If that's the players that were giving it their all, I hate to see what happens when they don't give it their all.
I mean, that is a ridiculous thing to say. I'm sure they did try, but it was absolutely woeful what they served up. For whatever reason, a multitude of things, and throughout the whole season, it's been like that. And he needs to use these 2 weeks to get a rocket up their bahookies, up that X-Texaco that's going to be there. And
I suppose finally to end this rather cheery episode of Red Glasses, that well, again, as I said, if you're still sticking with us at this point, thank very much. I hope you've enjoyed this therapy session. But
subscribe.
Subscribe, please do, wherever you're listening or watching. But Calum, how important now, we're saying that comments is maybe a bit strange from Jim Goodwin, but the players themselves, these players, regardless of where their future lies, if it's at Pittodrie or not, have got to start taking some level of responsibility of their performance levels. They've got to start showing some fight. They've got to start showing some desire. Because right now, if the going gets tough, this squad, in my opinion, isn't tough enough. If this squad have to fight to stay in the league, I don't see where that fight is coming from these players. Because once again, in an important game this season where we need to go and get a result, or we need to see something from this squad, we've been let down. And as much as you might want to blame a manager, you might want to blame a chairman, the buck's going to have to start stopping at the players, because these players have to be delivering, and they're not.
They're not. I mean, I saw someone say on social media, forgive me, I can't remember quite who it was. They said something along the lines of, how bad is this squad when you've had a change of manager and there's still no new manager bounce? I mean, it's two different managers, not being able to get a tune out of them, whether that's to do with the squad being assembled poorly. I mean, on paper, there's good players in there. There's a lot of good players in there. And it's just not clicked, whatever. They've not been up to scratch, but they need to start taking some accountability for that. You can't blame Stephen Glass, Jim Goodwin, whoever, when you're out there every week in, week out, and you're delivering, below par performances.
Yeah, 100%.
On that cheery note.
On that cheery note, we'll be back next week to preview our first bottom 6 game at home to Livingston, because there has been a lot to digest this week. So to give you some extra content next week, we will come back with a much shortened episode, and hopefully a cheerier episode. I don't know how cheery it can be looking forward to a bottom 6 game, but we'll see how that pans out. As I said, previewing the home game against Livingston, where hopefully we see a much better performance and a reaction from those in red.
Fingers crossed. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you follow us wherever you're listening. Follow us on Twitter at RTG_podcast, on Twitter at RTG.podcast, on Instagram, and subscribe. Help us reach that 800 subscriber mark on YouTube before the end of the season. And ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on further misery. Thanks very much.